Welcome to the Rural Well. I'm Bridget and I'm joined by Loren. And folks, we are so glad that you are here to join us today. We're going to talk about some tough stuff that we often try to ignore for fear that it becomes our reality. Folks, if you are listening and you have little ones close by, or you have been impacted by a loved one dying by suicide, we invite you to pause the show, maybe tune in later. Remember, you are precious. Your story is important. Our world is better because you are in it. So if you're running for parts to the equipment dealer, you're helping steady a newborn calf, or you're waging war against those pesky tomato hornworms, flip a chair, have a tissue handy, and join us at the Rural Well. Loren, please tell me more about what we're going to talk about today.
Folks, I want to take the minute just to introduce you to Diane. Diane is also an avid gardener, and she probably has her own experiences with hornworms. I'll tell you this, as a young child, I was mentored by this woman who taught me how to weave. And I would weave these big mats. And one of her jobs as a child was to go and pick off those bugs. And she used to, this is years ago before there was, pesticides and such. And she would say she would actually have nightmares of those bugs. She just hated them so much because that's how she had spent her childhood, was picking off those bugs and squashing them. So I'm not sure if you're listening and you're completely grossed out at this point, but those bugs are definitely pesky. We might cut that whole thing out just for the record, everybody.
I like it.
All right. Well, folks, as Bridget mentioned, we're going to be talking about some tough stuff today. And, it's important that you are able to keep yourself safe. If for any reason you feel like you're unable to keep yourself safe, we would ask that you call 911 or visit your nearest hospital. And even though you do not feel worth it right now, that's a lie, and you are worth it. And I hope that if you don't hear anything else today, you hear of your value and you hear that your story is important. And the reason why we've invited Diane Bergsma, a very dear friend of mine, to talk today is because her story, her family story, is so precious, and it has helped many other people all around Canada, and I believe in the US, help families thrive. And so welcome, Diane. It's a pleasure to have you with us today on the Rural Well.
Thank you.
Diane, you are a visionary of Three Oaks Cabin. You're a pig farmer, a person of deep faith. You're a devoted wife and mother, and my dear friend. I am wondering if you could give us a little bit of an introduction for our listeners.
Okay, well, thanks all first for inviting me here and for your friendship, Loren. It touches my heart very much to be your friend and to hear you call me your friend. You've been a coach and a person of great that we can depend on for so many things and to count on. So thank you for that. As far as our Shetland front goes, I'm married to Al. We farm with our family near Shetland, Ontario. We have a hog and cash crop operation. We were blessed with 7 children, 5 boys and then 2 girls. We have 2 grandbabies who we love very much. And we also have 7 special people who love our children very much, and we're very grateful for them as well.
I got to tell you, when you say that there are extra people who love your children, I don't think there's anything wrong with having extra people love your family. That's a beautiful blessing. Lucky to have.
I find the same thing too. When our 3 children have all found their lifelong spouse, and they're incredible people, and they bring out the best in our own children. So it's like you get to celebrate twice over, right?
Yes.
So Diane, I would love to know more of your story. And one of those things would be talking about your son, Dallas, and all that he loved.
Well, Dallas was our number 3 son. He was also number 3 firefighter on Don Euphemia Department. And it was interesting that you started the conversation about hornworms, because when Dallas was 6 years old, for his 6th birthday, he got 6 chickens, and he sold eggs to everybody that drove in the laneway. He drugged them to church. He drugged them to wherever he went just to get rid of them, because he was a born little businessman. But his chicken's favorite souffle, he called them, was to pick off the hornworms off my tomato plants, and he would put them in a bucket and stir them up, and that would be the souffle that he would feed to his chickens, and they absolutely love them. So Loren, there's a hint, get some chickens and they will take care of your hormones.
I have chickens. I never thought about feeding them to the chickens. Diane, this is like an epiphany. I don't know if that's the proper term, but this is like a wow moment. So thank you. That will bring you more delight.
I don't think of myself as a vindictive person, but hornworms, the chicken
they can go
for them.
They can go.
So Dallas, with his egg money, he bought little pieces of machinery and he would put them at the road and sell them for a little bit more money. And he scrimped and saved. He was very thrifty and frugal. And on his 18th birthday, he had enough money to buy his own farm with his own money. Dallas was a very aggressive, in the good sense, farmer, a young farmer. He was not afraid to take risks. He really wanted to grow the operation and to be my husband Al's partner on the farm, and he did very well. He was also very determined. And so they bought more farms and they built a new hog finishing facility in 2018. He was very growth oriented. Dallas was also a very loving person. He would be the person who always stood up for the underdog. He loved caring for the underdog. As a matter of fact, after he passed away, there were so many sympathy cards that had little notes in there. Your son Dallas, took care of my son when he was in grade 9, and he was, the little wimpy kid in grade 9, and Dallas would take care of him. Or Dallas stood up for my, son or daughter in the school bus. Or Dallas, boosted their self-confidence in one way or another. So he was very people oriented, and he would pick up on people's struggles and have just the right word or just the right timing to come alongside. And often he did that with humor. He was the funniest person that I know or have known. He was the connecting link in our family and also in the on the fire department. So he was kind of the go-to person. But because of a lot of it was because he could shed a lighter side on whatever was going on. He would, say something funny, and it didn't dismiss whatever was going on. It just made it a little bit lighter. And I think one of the most touching moments shortly after he passed away was when the fire chief of the fire department had lost his wife 3 months prior to Dallas passing. And the fire chief said, I was in the backfield trying to cope with my grief and trying to work through it. And I was cutting or mowing clover. And he says, I saw this, big cloud of dust coming down the gravel road, and I was wondering what that was. And I saw it was a black Dodge truck. And he said, if tires could squeal on gravel roads, that's what they would have done. He says, it came to a screeching halt, and Dallas just kind of skittered. He could run like the wind, and he kind of skittered across the field to the back. And Dave said he jumped up on the tractor. He didn't say a word. And Dave was a giant, burly man, and Dallas was very willowy and sinewy, but not very large. Anyways, Dave says he gave me the biggest, tightest bear hug, got off the tractor, ran back to his truck, and off he went. He says, but it changed my day because someone saw and someone cared and someone stopped for a moment to acknowledge that I was having a hard day. And he says he did that without saying a word. And that was one of his strengths, that he could just sense when someone was hurting and take the time to come alongside.
What a beautiful soul.
There he was.
When I've learned about Dallas, or I've met Dallas through his family, through Diane and through Al telling, me about Dallas. And I'm captured by his generosity towards others. And I mean generosity in spirit, not just in financial. It was his deep caring for. And Diane, you've talked about, other guys on the fire team and other people in his life. And I certainly wished I had been able to meet him in person, but I feel like I have had the best opportunity to meet him despite the grief that you've experienced, Diane. Diane, tell us about what brings you to the place where we'll talk about suicide? I mean, Dallas ended his life. He took his life here in November of 2020. And sometimes online, so people are aware, the term unalive themselves has become very common. The reason, of course, is through social media, but it's becoming a term that more and more young people are using. And so we want to celebrate the families that hold a loved one dear, some people who have been impacted by the sudden death of a loved one. And we understand that when someone has died by suicide, it's not about blame. And it's very easy to slip into that place where we blame the person who took their lives, or we blame ourselves, or, we blame somebody else in their lives. But ultimately, when someone dies by suicide, it is tragic. It's a tremendous loss. And we want our listeners to know, to the families that have endured such loss, that you're not alone. It is far too common in our agriculture community. In fact, rural kids are 4 to 6 times more likely to die by suicide than urban kids. In the US, farmers are 4 times more likely to die by suicide. And in Canada, it's 2+ times more likely to die by suicide than their urban counterparts. And so there isn't anyone I know in the agriculture community that hasn't been touched by suicide. They haven't been impacted by it. And it's important for us to understand that this journey is tragic, and it's hard, and it doesn't make sense. And yet there's stories of beauty from ashes. There's stories of beauty from the pain that has enveloped families. And Diane, that is one story that your family shares.
So I'd like to ask some questions there about that. So Diane, how did you decide to celebrate Dallas's life in the months and the years? Where did things go for you after he was gone?
Oh, initially, I think it was just brokenness is the word that sums it up, because we had no idea that he had been suffering the way he obviously had been. We didn't have the tools to recognize that he was suffering. And it's funny, Lorraine spoke about guilt. That was the initial beast. If only we had, how come I didn't see it? Why, how did we miss it? And that was definitely something that was part of the early brokenness. And once we, worked through that and found the tools to start accepting the new normal and to celebrate what had been and to properly grieve what would not be. Our faith has been our lifeline, our anchor, our rock. Through church family and through the local community, we were very well supported, and feel like God has definitely, supported us and reached out to us through the hands and feet of the beautiful people that came alongside in our season of sorrow. Yeah, I think that was the biggest thing initially, to just survive each day, to make it through the day and check up on our family members and make sure that they made it through the day okay. And then over time, when we learned about the statistics and about how many people suffer the way our son had, we could not sit by and know those statistics and facts and not do anything. So that's where Three Oaks was born.
Tell me about Three Oaks. I know very little, but to me it sounds like it has become a place of peace that helps you share your life, your son's life, with many others.
I think that sums it up very nicely. It's the project of Three Oaks is intended to help other people who are suffering, but simultaneously it has been a project and a place of healing for our family as well, to find a channel where our loss and our grief has a positive effect, or a beauty to it that would otherwise not exist. As much as we sorrow and grieve for the loss of Dallas, we have to acknowledge that this place would not be available to people had we not suffered that loss. And so we celebrate what has been and our time with him. And it was beautiful. And we will see him again. And that gives us hope to go on. And in the meantime, we just want to use Three Oaks as a place of healing and hope for people who are in their season now. And so we built a log home in our woodlot, and we're using it as a place where we invite people who just need a place to land, who need to reorient or refocus and to get their footing back, and that they can just come and stay and enjoy the nature and the peace of the log home.
How many folks have been able to use the Three Oaks cabin in the time that it's been constructed?
We opened our doors on May 3rd of this year, and I believe we're up to 47 people that have either come or booked.
That is outstanding.
And we've also had 2 workshops in there from first responder communities that use the loft as a place where they can hold a workshop.
Were you surprised by the number of people who reached out and said, I need this place of healing?
Surprised, happy, and also a little bit sad. Happy that people are reaching out for help that when they need it, but also a little bit sad because so many people are at a place where they need that extra boost and the extra help. That means they're living in a place where there's too much stress or too much fatigue. Mm-hmm. And that I find that as a person who's suffered through the loss of a family member by suicide, that makes me unsettled that there's so many people, living in that world of mental fatigue.
Do you feel that many of the folks who come to Three Oaks come from a background in agriculture, or do you see all walks of life who reach out to your family, Diane, and want your help?
We've certainly had a lot of people reach out from across different communities. Lots of invitations, or like, how was it? What was it like for you, or those kind of comments. But I think generally we've also made a point of really connecting with the agricultural world and the first responder world. Definitely since May 3rd opening day, we've had more first responders through and reach out and come and stay than farmers. And I'm hoping that farmers come when they have a downtime on their farm. And I believe we've had a very hard spring here in Southwestern Ontario, that they just haven't had headspace or time to book it. At the same time, because they haven't had headspace and time, I hope they really try hard to find a snippet of time to take a break.
I have, I guess, an unusual question. And that is, I have some friends here in the state of Illinois. They also lost their son just a couple of years ago. They lost their son through a car accident. You lost your son to suicide. You are grieving parents. How can the rest of us come to you to express our sympathy and offer our help? Because we all feel awkward and we don't know what to say. Do you have any advice for us, Diane?
I think losing a child is a very lonely grief, because thankfully not many people really understand it. And that's a beautiful thing, because not many people have to suffer this tragedy. But I think, especially when you're in the early stages of grief, if people just come and don't try and find the right words, there are no right words. But if they just come and sit and hold that space, acknowledge the deep grief and loss, and that it's, this almost sounds self-centered, but that the visit or the time together is only about the grieving person and not about the visitor or the person coming over to somehow feel better about the grief, getting better while they're in the room, sort of thing. If the conversation needs to be about how the visitor feels better when they leave, then it's not a very good visit.
I agree with you.
Or when people ask questions like, it's been this long, you must be getting better by now. Or like assuming that today you're in a better spot than you were 3 months ago. Grief isn't linear. It's not tied to time. It comes in waves and it never really goes away. It's something that you learn to carry. And I think over time you learn to carry it better and maybe even well. But there is no linear to grief. So I think holding space and just sitting quietly without trying to force words or find words, or that would be the one thing I would suggest to people.
Yeah.
You know, in the Jewish tradition, when somebody passes away, they sit situ, I think it's called. They're sit shiva. Sit shiva.
Shiva.
It's basically like a 10-day period where people come just and sit with you and mourn with you and tell stories about the loved one who's passed. And it's focused on the loss of the loved one. And in our culture, and soon after someone has passed, regardless of how much shock is associated. So if you've had a child who has, passed away very suddenly without forewarning, or you have a great granny who's been knocking on, heaven's gates for 10 years, it's a very rapid process, right? You have a couple of days basically to kind of throw together this, like, how do I wrap up all of these emotions? How do I celebrate this person? And yet I'm deeply grieved and I'm shocked. I'm quite frankly in shock. And I think about my brother and sister-in-law, and I often tell the story of the loss of their son and how easy it is for people to make themselves feel better at your grief expense, as Diane mentioned. And so there is great wisdom in what you just shared to ensure great wisdom to ensure that you don't make it about yourself, that when you're sitting with that grieving family, it's about their experience. And if you don't have the right words, don't say anything. Just sit and be present. In fact, when I asked in-law who was the most helpful, after Mikhail passed away, after Mikhail died, she would say it would be the people who would come and sit on my couch and just fold laundry with me. We wouldn't say anything. There would be shared tears from time to time, but there was no, let's make Skittles and sunshine out of your pain because the pain is too painful. Instead, they would just sit and be present and sit Shiva with her. And so, Diane, I am so appreciative of your willingness to be so transparent in that. I thank you for sharing your passion and your insight. I'm excited for Three Oaks Cabin. The National Farmers Mental Health Alliance has come alongside Three Oaks Cabin, and we provide some of the mental health support for individuals who make use of the cabin. And, it's our goal that people get tools, that people are reminded of how precious they are. And for those of you who are listening that are struggling with finding your purpose, struggling with finding the future, because it doesn't feel very bright, it's important for you to hear this message that you are precious, that your story is precious. And we invite you to reach out. We invite you to get the support you need in order to thrive, because you were made to thrive. So with that in mind, we're going to shift gears a bit. Diane, I hope you will join us. In fact, I'm going to ask you to read the quote for our Catch a Phrase segment. Go ahead and read that quote for us, Diane.
Sure, thank you. The quote is this: "We must accept finite disappointment, but never lose infinite hope."
We must accept finite disappointment, but never lose infinite hope. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Wow. Okay, what are your first thoughts there, Bridget?
my first thoughts are going to go to our story with Diane today. And that is, I am so sad that you will always carry this sadness of the loss of Dallas. But I heard you say that you have indefinite hope because you will see him again one day. And you created Three Oaks Cabin in order to bring hope to others. You are the embodiment of that quote, Diane.
Yeah, I don't think I couldn't agree with you more there. And it's interesting, the piece about the disappointment, the finite disappointment. And it seems as though we're struggling with that in our world, where disappointment, a moment of disappointment can just become catastrophic. And I think, in some research, there's been some individuals who have indicated that farmers have low resilience skills. And I would argue with that. I don't think we have low resilience skills. I would argue that we have used our resilient skills time and time and time again, and we're tired. And we haven't given ourselves permission to have hope. It's so true. When we think about those finite moments, sometimes they feel so big in those moments. I'm sure all of us can look back over our history and remember this time where this just felt so big. But when we can look past that and we find hope, and when we create hope and we hang on to hope, the possibilities are limitless. And for you, Diane, and your family, for the families that you've impacted and will continue to impact, the cabin isn't a short-term vision. It is a long-term vision, years and years and years. And I see so much hope in that opportunity.
I think too, the focus on keeping the word finite very centered in that quote. Right? Finite, it has an end. And I think when we build community and we are vulnerable and we build relationships, that's when we have the opportunity to sometimes add perspective to the fact that it's finite. Like our moments of difficulties and hardships and trials, we can lose sight of the fact that it's finite when we're in the middle of it. Yep. And so we need community and we need other people to remind us that this too shall pass, even sometimes to a degree. Sometimes it doesn't all pass altogether, but there is perspective to be created and enjoyed in community. And that's also part of Three Oaks, right? That we create that sense of community where we're allowed to be authentic and vulnerable and accept and even celebrate that, because we're human, and that's what makes us like not robots. We have relationships and we have feelings and we have emotions that makes us beautiful, but we have to be willing to be vulnerable enough to be part of a community so we can tap into those resources.
That piece about vulnerability speaks volumes. We might have to have you back another time, Diane, because vulnerability is a key component that we really need to embrace. Because you're right, that's where relationship is found and built and secured. So well done. Thank you so much. We'll turn it over to you, Bridget.
Okay, so I always like to have a question at the end, something that makes us think for fun. And so, ladies, I have one for us today. If for 1 month, 30 days, you could live at any famous residence or house in the entire world, which one would you pick?
Oh,
I see everybody looking upward, thinking. So this is simply going to be who raises their hand first with one. Or
I think I would have I need a little bit more information. Do like all of the helpers come with the residents? Because
we're going to say yes, because this is our game. We're saying yes. And that plays into the house I want.
If somebody's cooking me breakfast, lunch, and supper and scrubbing the toilet and all sorts of things like that, I could really embrace this idea. Like I'm thinking Buckingham Palace, something like that. But on the flip side of it, We live in Ontario, and north of where we live is what is known as the Muskoka area, which have just beautiful, beautiful, I don't want to say cabin. They're not even cottages, some of them, but on the lakes. And I just love being in that place. But I haven't traveled a lot, so I don't know. I don't know if I would have a completely different, like if somebody would say, like Beverly Hills, I have no desire. You know what I mean? Like those places, I have no desire. But a quiet cabin along the lake, woo, sign me up.
Diane, did one come to mind for you as well?
No, but I have an interesting thought, though. Lorraine and I have been talking about doing a road show, and I vote that based on this question, we pick that up sooner rather than later, and we travel to see which we can get back to Bridget with what place we would like to have.
Yay!
Deal. Maybe we should make a trip out to North Dakota. We could pick up Bridget on the way.
Yes. Yes.
It kind of sounds to me like you guys are absolutely planning the right thing here, a road trip with homework to bring back to this podcast. I like that. Well, if you're picking me up in North Dakota is one thing, but if I get my wish for my 30 days, you'll be picking me up in North Carolina. Oh. There is an estate called the Biltmore, and it was built by the Vanderbilts. It is a 250-room chateau that was built in 1895. I want the staff. I can't wait to get a cook. I like the idea of being able to go from room to room and see everything and learn the history. And then when the tourists come in every day, I can be like the greeter at the front door. So where are y'all from? What are you doing here? Do you like this? Can I tell you about this thing? Because I get to live here for 30 days. So let me tell you about this thing. And it's a big estate. So I don't have to live in an urban area. But yes, there you go. I'm going to the Biltmore in Asheville, North Carolina for 30 days. See you when I get back. I'll bring you t-shirts.
Okay. Deal.
I am indeed excited to hear folks' thoughts and impressions and their comments after our discussion today with Diane. And Diane, I don't think we can say thank you enough for sharing, for bringing your insights, and hopefully the fact that you're willing to join us again. Just who knows what the topic might be, but we'll probably need your support.
A privilege. Thank you.
Thank you for all of your time for listening today. We so appreciate it.
Thanks so much, folks. We'll see you next time.